uh, 30, 30 years later. I wish I could be present with all of you in a room. I miss those days so that we could, interact. I could, see and hear and see expressions. But hey, it's a whole new world, one in which sustainability and resiliency and equity is at the core of anything we do. I promise to you, all of you, no matter what business or form of law you enter in, you won't be able to escape the climate change aspects, how it impacts ourselves, our families, our communities, our cities, our counties, and of course, ultimately the planet. So I have about 2 dozen slides to go through just to kind of give you a hint of a taste of what sanitation has been involved with. Needless to say, if you watch any media whatsoever, or even content in quote unquote entertainment shows, you probably have seen a lot of themes. This is just one picture of Northern California that kind of suggest a lot of doom and gloom, and I don't want to amplify too much the threats that are out there. I think you may have read about fires and droughts and experienced them yourselves. Perhaps if any of you are almost as old as or half as old as Daryl and I, you might have been involved with an earthquake here in Los Angeles or in California, wildfires, all of these things that we just, not that many years ago thought would be taking place, in 2050 maybe, and then 2040. Well, news blasts, unfortunately, they're happening with far more uh, frequency and vigor than ever before. These are some great finds, which is a $3 billion industry in California, which were wiped out. So a lot of towns, a lot of people. You may know even people yourselves or have experienced some of these aspects. So it's important to be aware of them and to plan for them with far more urgency than I did when I was your age, because they are coming. The key principles involved with the work that I do and encourage others to be aware of. The Paris Climate Agreement was something you may not have heard of before, but it certainly was a large global effort. 197 nations signed on to this to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I can't ask for a show of hands, but hopefully you know what that means. These are the specific human-oriented things that we do in manufacturing and driving our cars and flying airplanes, riding in airplanes, et cetera, that add to the climate, right? That result in icebergs melting, in the Arctic Circle, to just heating up our local environment here in Los Angeles, or getting colder extremes in other parts of the country or the world. Environmental justice and equity are core issues to this. I was reminded by somebody who was attending a meeting here in Los Angeles, all the way from South Africa, about the haves and the have-nots. She had lived through the whole apartheid days, if you're familiar with that history, how a minority was governing the majority of citizens in that country. And, if we as engineers or planners, or maybe you as future business leaders or attorneys, don't start dealing with this issue, by the time it comes, it'll be too late, right? So the point is, you probably have heard of don't let perfection get in the way of good. We've kind of lost our ability to dot more I's and cross more T's, unfortunately. So what would happen is, in such, increased emergencies, catastrophes around us, the police, the fire departments would take over, not the engineers, not the planners, not the climate scientists, right, who have been advising us all along, right, to have earthquake kits in our offices, in our homes, in our cars if we have cars, things of that nature. And so that's kind of the scary part, right? If there's an expectation that any one of those first responders are going to pick up the phone when you call to say, hey, your whole neighborhood is on fire or has slid off the cliff or something along those lines. It's too late. Your first responders are going to be yourselves and your neighbors. So it's really important to adjust to that reality to make sure that you're in a good space and that you have communication lines open, because ultimately we're all living on this planet regardless of the political and geographic delineations. Good paying jobs, of course, helps with the socioeconomic divide and providing a transition to a green economy. That's something that myself as a CSO and CRO at LA Sanitation focuses on, along with our new mayor, Karen Bass, and all of her people that she's bringing into the city and leading by example. LA, California, has been a leader on so many of these issues. So good or bad, it's important to recognize that we, take that extra hour, extra inch, extra mile, to show that it can be done here, in spite of all the people who tend to either ignore the reality or argue about how climate change is caused, or don't mess with my profit margin. We have to and must, show a path, that, sustainability, equity, and resiliency is really the right way to move forward. Real quick, our sanitation is one of the largest city departments, and I would argue, especially given the past pandemic that we went through, does as much as for public safety as the police and the fire department do. They're often thought of first, based on films and experiences perhaps, but people don't tend to focus on, and school teachers, more so than in the past, focus on the importance of clean water and sewage and the impacts that it's destroyed civilizations, decades and centuries ago, right? Because they didn't have the science to, avoid common pathogens that exist all around us. Similarly, our watershed protection program is huge. It's thanks to all of you who may have supported Measure W about 5 years ago. Improving the water quality in our river, lakes, and beaches is critical to the economy here in Los Angeles, with tourists, and people wanting to see and recreate in our water bodies. Solid resources is the third core area where we manage our waste streams. Everything that doesn't go down in through the sewers of 6,700 miles goes into, hopefully into the appropriate color of bin for those of you that might live in Los Angeles or work here or go to school here. Or sometimes it ends up in the streets or in the river, lakes, or beaches, unfortunately. And it's up to sanitation. We get the blame for that. So we've got to somehow clean up after 4 million people, or whatever percent doesn't follow the rules along those lines. And finally, environmental quality is, something that has really sparked a lot of excitement among people who care about wildlife habitats. The recent passing of the mountain lion, P22, I think has shown some spotlight onto this issue. And of course, needless to say, all the unhoused people that live amongst us that just can't afford, and there isn't enough housing yet, although we're making great inroads on that with the new Inside Safe program from Mayor Bass. But, sanitation helps to clean up the streets, not by moving homeless people around, but by removing the grime that gets concentrated, the pathogens. I could name several that have gotten into those populations and have made people sicker than anyone should be. So we do a lot around there that helps support the businesses, access to schools, parks, as well. So that's an important aspect of what we do. These are our 5 zeros that we kind of go by, reducing the amount of energy that it takes. That goes back to counting and inventorying our greenhouse gas emissions. So we want to get off the grid. Our largest water reclamation plant at Hyperion, which is just south of Los Angeles International Airport, has achieved 100% renewable energy. The goal is by 2045, we're actually off the electric grid, and we run that plant off of the biomass that all of us send down the sewers through our sinks and toilets and showers It's a pretty amazing project that's been going on for about 4 or 5 years now. So that's a big deal. Our buildings globally are, kind of in bad shape overall. Many of them are old, outdated. So how can we improve the HVAC units there, how we refrigerate? We work with a lot of industries and businesses to do that. So if you're involved with the business sector at all, being aware of how you can reduce the electricity and natural gas you have to run those operations inside of those buildings. Transportation, needless to say, we're far behind a lot of other American cities, but thankfully the 2028 Games is pushing us far forward. We've got a friendly administration in DC that's sending California a lot more money than in previous years to get our subway back on track. And we've got the most EV vehicles, and we're pushing to electrify our massive fleets. Zero waste is huge. We can't keep throwing things away in landfills, so we've already got the lowest hanging fruit, 20 and 30 years ago with the blue bin, the green bin, and now we're working on things like carpet and mattresses and textiles and things like that, keeping those out of the black bin, which goes directly to the landfill. And I already talked a little bit about zero wasted water. Conservation and reuse are the name of the game. How can we use less, take shorter showers, reduce the lawns? There's a $5 square foot turf replacement program that our LA Department of Water and Power offers to homeowners to get rid of their lawn. And we provide different pallet ideas for people to use that money for, other California drought friendly alternatives. So each one of you, hopefully is already an environmental steward or soon will be one. You need to know where your water comes from. Realize that there's no new water delivered to Los Angeles from, outer space or the Swiss Alps. That all water on this planet is recycled. I sometimes scare a few people when I when I kind of semi joke that we're all drinking dinosaur piss. So forgive my language, but just to give you an idea that, all this water has been on this planet from the very beginning of time. Uh, Potable water is what's drinkable water. We have the technology now to produce that in any city. A lot of it is, all of it is very energy intensive and expensive, but the ability to do it is there. It's just not something that the lay people, so to speak, are comfortable with. So a lot of it will come from educating oneself on, how we can just remove the contaminants that are in water. Raw sewage, by the way, is 99% pure water. It's just the 1% of what we, waste into it. It makes it, into something that's obviously not desired, doesn't smell or look good. So, but we have the ability to clean that water. It's not something that like gets transported millions of miles away. We have to keep it within our region, especially in the arid Southern California place where we live in. And of course, as I mentioned, let's avoid wasting it. You see water running down the street. I walk up to my neighbors and let them know their sprinklers is broken or something along those lines. This is on board. Our LA San has one ship that does environmental monitoring. These are water microbiologist and a chemist, and they take samples of fish and water out in the bay. This is in the Marina Del Rey area, as you might recognize. So yeah, we go all the way deep. They do deep dives, shallow dives, just to see what's going on out there because we do discharge a lot of our effluent from our Hyperion and our Terminal Island water reclamation plants. We want to make sure we're not harming the marine life or habitat there. And so as each year goes by, we're getting cleaner and cleaner. When I first started my career over 30 years ago, we were discharging sewage sludge into the ocean and took a federal consent decree to stop cities from doing that and to realize there's beneficial elements in the biosolids that can help us grow crops, can make fertile lands more fertile, composting, right, to support plant health and reduce the amount of irrigation that's needed when there's more carbon in the soil and nitrogen. So this is just sort of one of the aspects I want to make sure you know about. And that is our Hyperion plant. It's just south of the LAX. And that pipe, you can kind of see it there, is a 5 mile outfall pipe where all the effluent goes out from the plant itself. It's a great tour. If you ever want to learn more, I encourage everybody to visit a water reclamation plant. This just happens to be the biggest one west of the Mississippi. Moving on to watershed protection, Measure W was literally a game saver in terms of establishing a safe, clean water program. We have so many water bodies here in Los Angeles. This is Echo Park Lake, which is seen in a lot of film and TV shows because of the backdrop of our downtown city sightline. And that was a mess. Everybody driving up around that park with all the copper that comes from our brake linings in our cars, people that just happen to not pick up after their dogs, people that just leave their, McDonald's food container, whatever, whenever it would rain, or even more frequently, just what I call refer to as urban slobber. People overwatering their lawns, washing their cars on their driveways. That water would take all those cigarette butts, etc., into this precious, iconic lake. And so finally, we had money to fix it and to put a clay liner in it to reduce the amount of water loss, so we didn't have to keep refilling it up every day. And now it's just a great place. If you need an idea for a date, for example, it's a wonderful place to visit. They have the little swan boats that you can pedal out there. We have a lot of inspectors that take samples to make sure we're maintaining the safety standards. Here's just a couple more examples beyond, well, Echo Park Lake. There's some before pictures. On the left is something that's in South Los Angeles, one of our disadvantaged communities. It was an old metropolitan uh, maintenance yard for all the buses. And over several years, we turned it into some wetlands. And I'll never forget being there with our previous mayor and a lot of communities. And I ran into a 9-year-old girl who had never seen a bird up close. And it almost made me cry because she had just never been to the beach even. Just lives in South LA amidst a sea of less than desirable things in that neighborhood. And the school was built after the wetlands were there. I think the wetlands were built about 11 years ago. And it's just great to see all the life of birds and fish and plants. And it's just a calmness I think that community needed and deserved. And there's fewer liquor stores and criminal activity, quite honestly. So it's kind of nice. We hope we can do more of this in the park-starved parts of Los Angeles. Here's one more project, more of a drawing, but just to show that how we have been changing a lot of our streets where we do see high floods, poor water quality, fewer green spaces, right? So it's not that technologically difficult or advanced to do this. It just takes money to do it and a community to support it. I think once we do projects like this, like we did for the 20-acre parking lot at the LA Zoo, people stopped throwing their dirty diapers onto the parking lot after we made it nice, right? With drought tolerant plants and median strips and permeable pavement. So that's one way in which we can capture a lot of this rain that otherwise would just flow off into the ocean. Moving on to our solid resource program, people often think of single-use plastic bags. It's something that we banned in grocery stores about 10, 11, 12 years ago now. We're expanding that ordinance. Our last mayor signed it on his last day in office to hardware stores, clothing stores, restaurants, food service providers, farmers markets, etc. So you're going to start seeing less of these. They're just so prevalent. And sadly, the wind picks them up, the storms pick them up, and they wind up in our trees, in our shrubs, all over the 465 square miles of Los Angeles. So we've seen a lot less over the last decade, but we can do better on that. So we're committed to, as I mentioned earlier, increasing our solar power capacity at all of our plants that we own. We've got over 700 trash trucks that pick up our recycling and our trash, both the large heavy duty ones and the medium duty. So we're working on battery technology. There's a lot of companies in China that have had some success there, capturing our methane gas at our 6 closed landfills and converting it to electricity, which we've been doing for a long, long time. I mentioned getting Hyperion off the grid, and also, reminding building owners, commercial industries, individual businesses to follow the various, local environmental, low impact development ordinances through LEED principles, and energy consumption, as I think I mentioned that as well. Back to plastics, reducing single use. LAX has stopped selling single-use plastics, or soon will. So that's exciting. We got to get into the habit of bringing our own, and restaurants can and are allowed now to fill up those containers that we bring into them. It helps their bottom line as well, right? So here's some of the ordinances. The straws on request, which you may have heard about 4 years ago. That's another plastic that does harmful things to sea life. And then just in recent years, foodware accessories that are, all that plasticware that a lot of people, they might use it once, if at all. The carryout bags, polystyrene or styrofoam, as more people kind of know it as, that's been banned. And so getting inspectors out to, try to be a good cop initially and just remind people, make people aware. Not everybody follows, all the city ordinances, getting the word out, in our march to, again, become a zero waste city. No longer can we have any of these at any city facilities or events. And hopefully that permeates throughout all of Los Angeles into the private sector as well. This is styrofoam, as you may know it. Hopefully it's soon a thing of the past. I've seen a lot more reinforced paper products that would serve the same purposes as these vessels do. But yeah, to the degree you're aware of, right? You've heard of reduce, reuse, recycle. Let's also add refuse as the fourth R. Let's try to come up with alternatives and stop consuming and purchasing so much. I know we don't always have a choice, but if we stand up as one, as two, as 1,000, as 1,000,000, the businesses get the word and they change their practices. I think I just mentioned this ordinance. Food waste is huge. All of us, there's plenty of cute little videos out there, or memes, that show the life of a strawberry, for example, all the effort it takes for it to grow on a farm, get transported to a big city and packaged, sold in a market, for us to buy it, and then we maybe eat 5-10% of them, and they wind up getting moldy on the back of the shelf of our refrigerators, and they get tossed out. So again, just being more conscientious of the food you purchase for you or your family would do a lot to reduce the amount of food waste. The typical family of 4 could feed a 5th person, the amount of food waste that Americans typically waste. We do a lot of promotion on reuse and recyclable materials as well. But food waste is a huge one. The amount of water it takes to grow, a steak, produce a steak, or an avocado. You can pick almost anything. It's pretty tremendous, and so has big impacts. And I know it's controversial to talk about eating meat versus not eating meat, but just be aware. All we can do is make people aware of the information, and hopefully everyone makes the best choice for themselves and their families. Carbon neutrality, back to the sort of macro level, we do, as I mentioned earlier, measure all our greenhouse gas emissions in the community sector as well as the municipal sector, creating green jobs. There's a great documentary about how some former gang members, they got out of prison, couldn't get a job, and now they're installing solar panels on roofs. Great stories, and they can now feed their families in a way that's acceptable, to themselves and by society. So there's great success stories along those kinds of lines. So just, again, creating more awareness on what's out there. How do we get to a net zero world? This is just some more aspects of the different waste streams that we have, things like green waste and glass and metal, mixed residue, bulky items. Hopefully, if you live in Los Angeles, you can call 311 and call for a bulky item pickup, an old sofa, refrigerator. Those get into the proper hands. Electronic waste, paint, solvents. We have 7 safe centers throughout Los Angeles where anyone can take those materials that are considered hazardous, drop them off typically on the weekends is when they're open. This is a picture of where some of the organic waste goes. We try to compost that here locally, where we can produce soil amendments for our yards and our own parks. We have about 406 parks throughout Los Angeles that we operate, that the Rec and Parks Department operates. Farmers markets, all of those have drop-offs for any of your organics. We have vegetable peels, coffee grounds, eggshells. But also just recently, there's a new law. There's a kitchen pail program where you should be putting those materials from your kitchen into your green bin if you're a homeowner. And I think slowly they're getting into the apartment multifamily dwellings as well. Here's a shot of Griffith Park composting. This is a facility that I designed and started to operate my first few years at my job. I think it was about year 5. And also the adjacent education center where we teach about 50 people almost every other week. We've got 4 of them throughout the city. We teach them how to compost in their backyards. We sell at a very subsidized rate different composting bins, teach people about worm composting. The kids get really into it. And just, everyone's got to kind of help us, mimic nature to decompose our organics. We just can't afford to truck them to landfills, which are scarce, which are expensive, which creates nuisances in faraway places. There were some ideas about building landfills in the desert, and there was some opposition from advocates, in those low populated areas. So we really, bringing things closer to home really is the way to do things. I think a lot of European countries know and have been practicing this a lot longer than Americans have. I think I'm near the end here. Healthy soils and biodiversity. We have a huge biodiversity program where we're the first American city to index our biodiversity, all of our wildlife habitats, tree canopies, all the different species. We've got an expert panel of 32 people that specialize in birds and fish and reptiles. It's incredible, this group. And so they're super excited that the sanitation's been paying attention to this. This came from a city council motion about 5 years ago, and all the things that we can do to improve wildlife corridors, et cetera. Similarly, on healthy soils, we've been teaching a lot at different schools, a lot of food waste at cafeterias. You can have sort of a teaching garden and grow vegetables in part of the school, take over some of the playground. Here's what you can do to protect biodiversity, right? It talked a little bit about plant palettes. Sorry, this slide's a little hard to read, but focusing on more native, non-invasive plant palettes that would support your local wildlife. There's websites that are dedicated to that. Here's some of the councils names that you can also get information on. Of course, getting rid of the non-essential, pruning during the hot, dry summer months, abating weeds, reducing light pollution as something that helps our animals thrive and survive. There's been a lot of our new mayor signed the Monarch Butterfly Pledge recently, so that's great. That's part of that whole sort of cycle of life. So that's important using warmer colored lights, avoiding blue-rich LEDs, for example. Of course, capturing rainwater and stormwater. I've got 4 rain barrels at my house, and I use them to water my plants. Rain gardens that we're trying to get businesses to install through the low impact development ordinance I mentioned that we do at the public counters when businesses take their plans to public counters for approval for permits. increasing the amount of pervious surfaces, getting away from too much concrete and asphalt. We're making inroads on those things. And planting ground covers and cover crops, native plants that attract pollinators, etc. Earth Day is a Saturday. We will be at our Hyperion plant is where we're hosting it. So if you happen to be free from any time between 10 a.m. or 2 o'clock, you can probably visit any one of our 18 booths and learn about some of these aspects about what you can do, the success, the metrics we use to measure what we're doing, and leading by example. So with that, I'll open it up for some questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Doug. This was fascinating. I really enjoyed learning some new terminology like urban slobber. That's a good one. I like a good buzzword.
You can attach my name to that one.
You're going to own it and trademark it.
Okay.
I also love knowing that wastewater is almost 99% pure. That's scary, but
yeah, isn't it?
I don't even want to know the process that one goes through to purify it from wastewater to 100% pure. But
it's very technical, but it's basically physical, biological, and chemical in nature.
I will launch into the questions. The first one I think you've already answered, but maybe you can go into a little bit more detail. It says, is the city hosting any events that we can participate in on Saturday?
Yeah, this Saturday is our Earth Day. I think that that's hosted by my department, LA Sanitation and the Environment. That's in Playa del Rey from 10 to 2, where you can learn about a lot of the aspects I've already talked about, programs, or probably some other projects that I couldn't cover. We'd be here till midnight. But I think the LA Zoo, another city department, is doing something with wildlife. They do a lot of education. The aquarium down at Leo Cabrillo, down in the Harbor District, is typically doing something this Saturday. But I say every day is Earth Day at LA Sanitation, right? We just can't pretend it's one day and then we forget about it and we go on to other things. I mean, we've got to do all these things in unison, in parallel, as best we can to clean up our air, our streets, our water. So there's tons of websites, lasan.org, of course, shows a lot of our programs. I wish we had people like Daryl to improve upon it, or people that are great with graphics. But that's part of the storytelling, and I think those are some of the opportunities that some of you, perhaps who might be in those lines of businesses, can offer to the public sector, which generally doesn't have a lot of money to spend on how things look. We're so focused on doing things and operating things and supporting, the quality of life here. We don't tout ourselves too much because we don't really have much competition, right? I often will say streets and sidewalks aren't red or blue, right? Or potholes or any of that. We need more trees. We need more parks. We need access so that everybody can enjoy living in places like Southern California, across the whole country and the world itself. So
wonderful. This question comes from the dean of the business school, Talon Brown. Thank you for joining, Talon. He writes, it seems that the green industry will continue to become critical to our economy and survival. Are there roles for those who don't have a science background? If yes, do you have any ideas or suggestions on how or where the business people and legal minds can get involved in this industry?
Great question, Dean Brown. Yes, absolutely. We have a green business program, which I didn't touch upon. We've got, I think, about 830 businesses, from hotels to restaurants, universities. I think there's some fraternities in there as well. Any kind of business. And there's a list of principles that businesses are asked to follow, incentivized. There's the California Green Business Program. I think there's a U.S. Green Business Council. You can look those up for more hints or tips on how to become a green business and get that seal of approval. And our team here in our recycling citywide division sends out inspectors and planners to help make that change. You could be, a hair salon, right? And if you're using chemicals and you're dumping them out into your back alley or flushing them improperly down the drain, or you're a restaurant with a lot of grease, you shouldn't be putting that material down the drain. There we have grease interceptors. There's a lot of best management practices that we engage with businesses on. So no, you don't need a STEM degree at all. You just want to, have a commitment to being good to your customers, to your neighbors, and to your bottom line. There's an argument to be had. There are, like anything new, there's often some initial expenses to install some of these. There are a lot of grants. There are a lot of DWP, for example, I think gives out $5,000, maybe more now, to companies that want to reduce water, reduce energy. I mentioned the Turf Terminator program for homeowners. It's the same for businesses that might have lawns or landscape areas. So there's just an abundance because I think we all, as city staff, realize we need to, we can do a better job within the city, but everyone else outside, in the private sector and the nonprofit corridors and spaces need some help, need some support. We don't want to always be the bad cop. So we want to teach people the right thing to do, and the Green Business Program is just one example of that.
Great. Another question came in. I have a friend graduating, presumably from another university, in May with a degree in sustainability. Do you see this as a growing area to pursue careers within? And do you have any predictions about the future of sustainability?
Well, gosh, if I haven't said it by now, yes, that's a huge arena. Specific degrees in sustainability. I've heard of courses. I've taken a course at UCLA Extension Program, which is incredible. Anyone can take it. I met waiters there. I met all people from all aspects of life that just wanted to learn more and maybe implement some of those practices within themselves, or maybe improve their marketability, to maybe transition to a job. There's film folks, studio people, prop makers, etc. So a lot of people that work in my field either come from the engineering side or environmental studies, sometimes a biology degree or chemistry degree. But yeah, if there's specific schools that are just focusing on sustainability degrees, of course, right? We need all hands on board to help everybody understand. It's hard for me, I'm just one person like everybody else, but my goodness, if you're striving to be part of the film world, or you want to host a radio show or a podcast, you have a greater ability to amplify these messages out to a bigger percent of the population than I do. Right? There's sea level rise I didn't talk about. It seems so far off, but there are tsunami signs along the coastal towns and parts of Los Angeles, up and down the coast. Should a major earthquake happen off our coast, that would have devastating impacts to not just to businesses, but to our lives. And are we prepared to handle that? I would say largely no, as an overall population. So yeah, we need to focus more on these issues. We can talk about air quality, water quality, right? So it's endless. There's so many subsectors of everything around us. I would challenge you to name something that is not sustainable oriented, or not going to be impacted by a changing climate. Be tough to do.
Thanks, Doug. One more question. This is an interesting one. At UWLA School of Business, we talk a lot about innovation. I believe you've been part of some amazing innovations at the city sanitation. Can you share one of your epic successes and at least one of your epic failures and what you learned from it?
What an epic question. I forget if I mentioned I think I did, getting sewage sludge out of the ocean. I think that was huge. That was early on in my career. We were putting in 1,300 tons every day, and I had to find uses on land for all of that ooey gooey, yucky stuff that I think a lot of us tend to think of it as. And, you know, as I studied it more, I realized it has beneficial aspects in there. And I connected with a farmer in Yuma, Arizona, who was willing to, you know, take all that we could produce because his farmland, he had a lot of farm, was just like almost pure sand. And over the years of sending, you know, 25 trucks a day, all that far distance, you know, this is before we were far more aware of impacts to air quality and through diesel trucks, exhaust. You know, he's just got this such fertile activity. He's grown crops. He's a millionaire now, and he was actually elected mayor of the town he lives in. So that was kind of a neat thing to do. Um, I talked about some of the Proposition O and Measure W projects that I worked on, that many others have since me have been working on, like Echo Park Lake, converting the zoo. I mean, those are just something I like the visible stuff. I've done a lot of sewer work too that's underground. It's not very sexy. People don't really see it or necessarily appreciate it. I personally know as a civil engineer, know how important that is. But you know, we have this flush it and forget it mentality. All of us, you know, not just in Los Angeles, but what we don't see, or what we don't respect or we don't want to think about. It's not warm and cozy, you know, apple pie issues. You know, so I remember I was at a Dodger game last year, and the person in front of me was chatting with my buddy, and the person in front of me just stood up, turned around, and I thought he was going to tell me to be quiet or something worse. And he's like, "Can I shake your hand? I just watched a PBS documentary last night, and you're one of the real heroes." So that made me feel really good, right? So people need to understand the connection of our waste, managing it properly, and how important that is. And you know, we just had the COVID pandemic, and so I think all of us got a real lesson on how dangerous, you know, if we aren't aware of what's around us or what pathogens are out there, people die, you know. So that's a positive. I can't think of anything I really failed on. You know, I wish I could. I don't want to sound like I'm anywhere near perfect by any means, but you know, it's almost like I have to be grateful for the things I can accomplish in any one day. You know, we all have those 24 hours, and you subtract out the sleep, even fewer. So I try to feel good about the things that I can help mold or shape, and not so much on what I can't do or what I don't have control over. So that's my advice to all of you out there. I'm not afraid of making mistakes. It's really important to try things. We can't just be doing things, you know, the same old, and expect different results, right? You've heard that saying before. Um, so yeah, you know, the sky's the limit. You know, your generation is receiving all of these plans, in a sense, all these expectations that my generation has been laying out, and the people in between. And something's going to happen. I don't again want to go doom and gloom, but we could have an earthquake next week, next month, and then all the attention gets focused on surviving that, while climate change still is happening. So the more you can be prepared, be better steward, look after your families, your neighborhoods, your neighbors, etc., I think the more successful you will be. Yes, arm yourself with as much education as you can, but think about how you can apply that to living in this world 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Great. Two more quick questions. One is, I think maybe pretty simple for you to answer. Part of your title says Chief of Resiliency. What does that mean, and how can we learn more about resiliency?
Yeah, so our previous mayor put together a Resilient in Los Angeles plan. I think I have it behind me, Resilient LA. I don't know if I can grab it, but it's basically, um, you know, trying to ensure that all Angelenos are educated and informed, that they have resources, that we lift people up to, you know, have safer, cleaner neighborhoods, that we look at how can we withstand both something acute like an earthquake, or something chronic like the homelessness, for example, issue, and how that impacts all of our quality of life. What are the issues? COVID was another one we just got through. How can we, be smarter about utilizing our resources, our human resources, our limited budget funds, to do the things that matter most? Very often our plates get full. I'm sure you might have some complaints about some of your professors, perhaps, right? Plus you're living your own lives. And at some point you go back to like, I only have so many hours in a day, and not everything can be an A priority. Not everything has to be emergency. I think we have mental and physical breakdowns if we are constantly in that mode. I share with my friends outside of the city. It's no easier working inside the city as it is working from the outside looking in sometimes. So, just again, arm yourself with education, like we do with resiliency. How can we withstand some of these things falling? We look at what's happening in other cities with maybe a bridge collapse, or buildings that might be collapsing. How can we retrofit our buildings? That's another key component. It involves more traditional structural and civil engineers to do that. But yeah, how many hundreds of thousands of people are living in apartments where there isn't a lot of extra money from the landowners to fix some of those issues? So awareness is part of it, but like coming up with solutions, what's more important? We've gone through rate increase battles. Those are potential for failure, epic failures. But ultimately, everyone who attended those meetings when we were discussing those highly controversial issues of rate increases, and it's awful. There's never a good time, even even not in when we're not in a pandemic, to say we're going to be raising rates just to like keep doing this work. It's just, it's challenging. But not one person ever said, "Hey, Doug, I had to cancel my Netflix subscription, or I had to turn in my cell phone." So, now that's not to say there are a lot of poor people living below the poverty threshold, and there's programs in place to not raise their rates, right? Lifeline, et cetera. But like, again, we have to be cognizant of those far more disadvantaged than us. They're high in number, unfortunately. And like I said earlier with the South African example, there'll be panic in our streets, right? I'll be driving a city car and people will be stopping me to say, "Hey, we're in trouble." So that's kind of what keeps me going, and trying to get the word out. But I think all of us can and should be and must be stewards on the environment. It's just that sneaky thing that's kind of creeping up on us. We used to be, worried about, other elements, in our midst, that might take away our freedoms or our ability to live and prosper, not thinking so much about the environment 20 and 30 years ago. We got to think about the climate and all those impacts that come with it.
Well, that's a good note to end on, Doug. Thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about. We're all going to do better. We're going to carry our reusable bottles with us, or reusable cups. Now that we can get them refilled in restaurants, that's the biggest tip of the day. That's really amazing. So we know we can do better recycling, and I love the idea of starting to refuse, even though that word looks like refuse. I don't know how to get around that.
Yeah.
But
Maybe
as a
maybe we put
marketing person, I'm going to think about that.
yeah, maybe we put the slash above the E, the first E.
There you go.
Use.
And I can't speak on behalf of Dean Brown, but I think you'd be a great college professor one day. So I think you have your future career ahead of you.
Thank you so much.
Great job.
My
On
privilege
behalf
here.
of UWLA, thank you. We will be making a donation to Earth or environmental charity of your choice in your honor. So thank you for your time and all the effort in putting this presentation together. It was terrific. It's been recorded for posterity. I'm sure it'll show up in classrooms in the future. And we really thank your time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Dean Brown, and everybody here on the call. Good luck to you and happy Earth Day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Happy Earth Day.